All right, so we've got a little question here from the Autodesk Chat Discord server, where someone is asking about using or creating a thickened slab under a wall. And there were some responses here: create in-place sweep, use modified concrete beam family, place a model line below the wall that needs thickened slab, and use the slab edge tool on that model line. So I wanted to show a couple of those different options and how to do them for Mr. Rocket here. And I wanted to show a couple examples of things that can be done and what they look like afterwards. And then we'll go through and do each of those. So we can see here we've got a concrete beam. I just modified the profile of the rectangular beam. I know it's not a rectangular beam. So we can see how that works. And I'll unjoin this just to see, so you can see how that works. And that's basically a beam that I used the pick line tool to create and offset at the thickness of the concrete. And then over here I have another method which uses the wall foundation tool with slab edges on model lines. So I wanted to show how to create each of these from scratch, and that way you can take care of them yourself. So I'm going to start with this method over here, and actually I'm going to start with kind of why you would use either of these, and then I'll go through how to make each one, and you can decide which one you want to use. So some things to consider when it comes to Revit. If you use this method where you're using the, come up here, beam tool, and using a concrete beam or just a beam family that extrudes a beam across a length, I'm going to hide this so you can see how it cleans up over here as well. I'm going to unjoin them from floor. Oh, I didn't offset this one. That's what happened. I was like, why is that not looking right? So you can see that each of these methods, they clean up, fairly nicely around corners. But one thing to consider is for scheduling and for takeoff, one of these is going to be under structural framing. The other one is partly going to be under structural foundation, and then part of it under slab edges, which honestly don't schedule all that great. Okay? Graphically, if you need to go through and hide things, you're going to be going through different places to find these. In fact, slab edges, I'm not even sure you can turn off. Oh, there they are, slab edges right there. So graphically, if you wanted to hide different aspects of this one, you would have to turn off two different categories in order to hide that or to manipulate the graphics for them, as opposed to here where you're just going in and turning off structural framing. Now, the thing with that is that if you have different types of structural framing in this view and you want to manipulate something by the entire category, you're going to end up dealing with splitting out parts of the framing from the slab framing in order to get your graphics to work correctly. So keep that stuff in mind as you go through here. And let's just go through and start making some of these. So I'm going to start with this over here, and we're going to use our wall over here. I'm going to show you how I did this over here. So the first part's pretty simple. You just use the structural foundation wall tool, and you click on your wall there. Now, one thing that you'll quickly notice is that there is no offset here, so it will always be here at the base of your wall. In fact, I don't even think I change this. Yep, I believe that goes up with it. So what you're going to need to keep in mind here is that you want to set your footing. Let's say that this total thickness is a foot. Okay, we don't need it to be 4 foot wide. Let's just make it 2 foot wide. Okay, there we go. And by the way, if you do that, be sure that you manipulate the. Oh, looks like somebody changed that already. Be sure you make a new type. Don't mess up other coworkers' work in your project. So make a new type, change the settings. So now I've got a 2 foot wide. So what I need to do now is I need to get these turn downs, the angled turn downs, or turn-ups on there. And the way I'm going to do that is actually by creating, as mentioned in the chat, some model lines. Now I have a line category here called foundation lines, and the reason that I do that, I'll show you where you do that. Go into additional settings, line styles, and you're going to create a new subcategory. You're going to call it foundation lines. The reason that I do that is so that when I create these lines, let's see here, foundation lines, we're going to lock it. We're just going to click these edges, and it's going to the top of slab work plane. And you can see that these are locking, and they're all locking here. And I'll show you just a second why that doesn't actually really matter. So I want to go to my floor plan view here. I just want to show you real quick why I have these categories for these model lines. And the reason is it makes it very easy to just go in and hide those all at once. And you can see that they've disappeared over here as well. Okay, so once this gets joined to my slab, you can see that it disappears. Now if I leave those on, foundation lines, we'll always have these lines sitting in our floor plan, and we don't want that. So this makes it very easy to work in one view and turn those off in another view. All right, so I've got my model lines, and I've got my wall foundation slab, and this actually says retaining footing, but it actually needs to be bearing type. And you can change that in the settings there. In the type properties, bearing, go. All right, so we need to make this slab edge, okay? And there's a couple ways you could do this. The most straightforward way is to just create a new profile. And I'm going to do that real quick. Create a profile for each side. I'm going to show you how to do that parametrically. New, family, profile. Okay. If you just use the profile template, it's good to keep in mind that the right side is your positive axis and the left side is your negative axis. So keep that in mind as you're working. And then, so this is your positive, 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 negative, 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 positive, just like you learned in geometry. And just to be quick about it, I'm going to just draw a triangle in here, and we're going to load this into the project. This is family 4. I need to keep that in mind. I would actually want to name this typically. But what I want to do now is go to structure, slab, edge, and I'm going to switch this to family 4. That's the one we just created. And now I can click along here, right? And we have a nice clean look there. Okay, I'm going to get rid of a couple of those. Add remove segments here. Yep, fine. Right now, mister. I'm just going to put these two edges right here. We're going to go in and we're going to make this parametric, right? So I want to keep in mind that we're clicking the top edge of this, okay? So what we want to do now is I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to modify this. So what you want to be able to do is to create a thickened slab that has a couple of properties. And first thing to keep in mind is that you're going to have a slab thickness, right? And this is usually going to be, 4 to 6 inches, something like that. So we're going to create some reference planes in here, preferably ones that are straight. There we go. And it helps to name them sometimes. So this is called center, front, back. It's actually not the center for us. This is called top of slab. Okay. And this isn't actually center, left, and right. This is actually for us exterior face of footing. Okay. and we'll call this, what do we call this? Length of turn down. I'll call this depth of turn down. Okay, and you can name those whatever makes sense to you, right? But one thing to note is that if I select both of these, defines origin is checked. Okay, so this corner is going to be where that line that we clicked, the model line, okay, to put our slab in, we need to make sure we know where that is. All right, so we're going to put a couple dimensions in here. And we did this thickness of slab. Our depth of that turn down is going to depend on how your engineers documented this. Now, I typically see this from the top of the slab. I have seen it from the bottom of the slab as well. We're going to make this from the top of the slab. No, we're going to make it from the bottom of the slab. Right? And you'll typically see something like 8 inches or 6 inches or something like that. So we're just going to put 8 inches here, and we're going to put 8 inches here. So you can start to see the shape that we actually need here, right? And it's up to you whether or not you make this look like this, right? Or like this. Okay, up to you. I'm going to leave it like this. Actually, no, I'm going to bring it down here like this. So our slab is going to take care of this void, and all we're going to be doing is putting this triangle down here in the bottom. Okay, and let's just see what this looks like. I'm going to load in the project, and it's the same family. So you can see we've got that step there. If I turn my slab off, we can see that it fills in that void underneath. And if I join that, I get a nice clean turn down. Okay. Now, what happens if my slab gets thicker or my foundation gets thicker? Let's go 1'6" on the foundation. Okay. Now we need to make this thicker. Right? And that's what all these parameters we're doing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start naming these. I'm going to select this dimension, and we're going to create a new parameter. We're going to call this slab thickness. We're going to make it a type parameter. Right. We're going to call this one turn down depth. By the way, don't use arithmetic symbols, operands in your name, because when you start using formulas, it doesn't work out too well. Turn down depth, nope, length, width, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Turn down width. Okay, so now I can come in here, I can change these parametrically. So we know that our total thickness is 1'6". So let's add, we're at 1 foot now, so we need to add 6 inches to this. Turn down depth equals 8 inches plus 6 inches, 1'2", hit apply. You can see that everything stayed in place. Now what happens if your lines are not going with it? Well, you just need to be sure that when you put those in place, when you stretch these around, that your lines move with it. If they're not moving with your parameters, or your reference lines, your bones as I call them, then you want to use a line and lock to get those work correctly. But for the most part, now in Revit, if you are snapping to intersections, for the most part, your lines should be locking. Okay, so we now have, let's go back to where there, right? So now I'm going to load this back into the project. And we can now see that it now matches, right? And I can find this family. Where were we? Profile, family 4. And we can create different types. I can edit this type. Okay. And I can make the slab thickness thicker. Right, So now if I have a thicker slab, duplicate sections, okay, now that matches, and then I would have to make that thicker as well. So hopefully you get the idea there. I'm going to undo a couple of those. All right. So what if instead of doing this on both sides, you can see if I add that on the other side, I've got a mirrored slab just like that. So what if I could take care of that in one profile instead of having to add it on both sides? So now, instead of having both of these model lines, I can just do this in one. Well, what would I need to do? The easiest thing to do here would be to add more parameters. Okay? What I can actually do here is just draw the same thing on the other side. I've already got the thickness here, or the depth. The depth is already taken care of. Alright, so now all I need to do is add this parameter, and we're just going to actually assign our turn down parameter on that. Sure, then we'll lock it. Oh, this is bottom of slab. Let's be sure we get that. Okay, and now I'm going to come in here and create more lines for my profile. Right, and then I need a parameter to control the separation of these. We're going to call this footing width. Okay, and we're just going to figure out what that is right now. Where did I have this at? 12 inches? We're going to set this to 12 inches right now. Okay, and let's load this back in and see what we've done. nothing good. It looks like, oh, that's right, 2 feet width. Okay, so the nice thing is, so what I did there is I hid that. I knew something wasn't right. So what I need to do is go find that family, right? And come in here and let's name this appropriately, right? Let's rename this according to the dimensions. 1 foot. And we're going to call this 24 by 12, 13. Wow. Right. By 8. So 24, 14, 8, or you know, whatever works for you. This is you can say it's a 8-inch turn down on 24-inch wide footing 4-inch slab. Whatever works for you. And the footing width, we're going to change that to 2 feet. That's our width across there. We're going to hit OK. You know, what's really interesting about this is that it didn't, looks like it's doing something weird with a cut right there, and that might have to do with my section box. I'd have to go back and look and see what's going on with that. So, but it looks like that fixed it right there. Okay. One profile, both sides, nice clean join. Now, I want to show you one of the issues that you're going to have with this is that if I move this wall, okay, even though I've locked my model line, if I move this wall, it doesn't like it, okay, and I'm going to have to realign this model line, right? I can lock it all day long, it's still going to do the same thing. I don't know why that is. Now if I just drag this back along the same line, just drag this back along the same line, okay, I'm going to have to readjust model line to do the same thing. Okay, so those are some caveats to using this option. And again, that's the slab edge on the wall foundation method, right? So let's move on to using a concrete beam. Which is this guy right here. I'm going to set my section box back up. It's not pretty, but it works. Okay, now let's go ahead and get rid of this. Right, so what I want to be able to do with this method is use the beam tool and select a wall to create a beam underneath the wall. Okay, some things to keep in mind for this are that if you change the offset of your wall, the beam does not go with it because it's based on the work plane of the slab. Now you might be able to pick the bottom of the wall. Yep, you can. After you create this, in order to keep that attached to the bottom of the wall in case that moves up and down, but that might not make sense because really it's based on where your slab is. Okay, so what we're going to need is we're going to need a beam family that we can use to create this using the pick line tool. So what we're actually going to do for this is create a new family. And this is going to be a structural framing, beams and braces. Right? When you come in here, you're going to get something that's already in place. Okay? So let's take a look at this real quick. We've got a couple parameters already in place. We've got length. Okay, so if we stretch the length, nothing happens. If we stretch member right, you can see that that changes the length of the actual member. And then this is the analytical stick symbol. I would not mess with any of these relationships, okay, because they are all kind of already set up to work with the parameters that will come in with the system family when you load it into the project. Right? Let's look at the way that this is created. It is an extrusion. Okay. So we can use extrusion, or we can use a sweep. Either one. I believe the default one that I've got in here, I believe, is a sweep. Okay. This is the one that I edited earlier. I'm just going to close that to avoid confusion. Okay. And I'm not going to save this right now. We're just going to call it Family 5 for now. But let's go ahead and edit this. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind is that, again, you have origins. Leave those origins the way they are, right? And I don't know. Yeah, I think we're okay to basically draw this wherever. I'm going to use my reference level. The reference level is usually actually the center of the geometry, but I think we can kind of draw this wherever we want it. So I'm going to hit Edit Extrusion here. Are we missing some information? Just make sure everything's turned on. Rotation lines. Okay. I'm going to get rid of this right here. I'm going to go ahead and draw my own reference planes. Right. So we're going to use this as our center. We need a left, a right, and we need our turn down widths. We need our slab thickness, and we need our turn down thickness, or our total slab thickness, or footing thickness, sorry. We're going to draw some dimensions here. And these need to be individual so that you can assign parameters to them. And we want to EQ this so that it's equal around the center. Keep that EQ'd. Right, these guys, let's go ahead and make that turn down. I don't remember what I called it last time. Width. Okay, and you see those are the same. Let's call this slab thickness. Now I'm including the slab in my beam here, right? You don't have to, but I typically do. And then let's call this footing thickness, or turn down thickness. Okay. Go ahead and make this 4 inches, and let's go ahead and make this 8 inches. Let's make our width 8 inches, and let's just make sure that this does, nope, didn't do this. Footing thickness, nope. This should be footing depth. Change that footing. Depth, let's say thickness, and then let's call this footing width. Let's make this 2 feet. Yep, good. So I wanted to make sure that if this moves, the other one moves with it. Okay. And I don't want these to change. So we want to make sure that when this moves, those move with it. So what I did there, I don't know if you noticed what I did, as I tested this, and always test your bones, your reference planes, but you can see the turn down width changing as I move this. I don't want that to happen. I don't want the turn down width to be determined by the footing width parameter. So I want to make sure these guys are locked. That way, if this changes from something inside project, the other ones go with it. All right, so I'm going to assume that we have the thickness of the slab here, and we're just going to go ahead and draw our lines. And this is for an extrusion. Right. Now, what I've done here is something terrible. I've put the reference planes inside the sketch. Those should have been outside and I should have snapped to them, but I'm going to leave them right where they're at for now. But you do want to, after you sketch, drag things around and make sure that your lines move around with it. I'm just going to go back to where I was. There we go. Now we can see now that we have our symbol and we have our beam. All right, so I'm going to load this into our project now that we've got that. And we can see that we have the option for pick lines, and all I'm going to do is I want to make sure my placement plane is the top of slab. Structural usage is probably going to be other. That's the other thing, you can't pick foundation for this. It's not really a girder. It's kind of a grade beam. And we don't want to use 3D snapping for this unless you're picking the bottom of the wall, which I'm not. But the center of our profile was in the center of the wall, or yeah, it was designed to be the center of the wall, so I want to be sure I tab through to get that, and tab through to get that. And let's just hide this real quick. Okay. You can see that we've got some offset issues. Where for some reason these are not joining up the way that they were before. And I believe the reason for that is that I did not use a sweep. I used an extrusion instead. Let's go back and see if that's what fixes it real quick. So instead of the extrusion, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. Let's go ahead and make sweep. Create sweep. We're going to path. We're going to sketch path. Right, and let's go back here, and this time we're going to do our reference planes here. We're actually going to do our reference lines outside the sweep, so I'm just going to draw something to get out of the sweep for now. Now let's put our reference planes outside of all the sketch modes, and take care of this real quick. We've already got our parameters in here, so we're just going to do slab thickness, footing thickness, turn down width, footing width. Okay, now we can go back and edit. Oh. That. Finish a couple times, and we're just going to make sure that no, we didn't quite get it, did we? Right. There's something else that I didn't do here. Need to fix that all this works real quick. This stays EQ'd. There we go. Okay, let's load this in and see if that fixes that. That didn't fix that. So it turned out that what it was the material for model behavior here. I had this set on other. That needs to be on concrete. So now with that set to concrete, we can load that in project. And before I do that, I do also want to show another thing that I changed is I believe the sweep I had going all the way to the edge. I went ahead and brought this to the member left and member right reference planes instead of taking them all the way out to the left and right reference planes. That seemed to help us as well. So let's go ahead and load this in. Over right. And we'll do beam. Tab through to the center, tab through to the center, and there we go. All right. Let's unhide our slab there. And we can see that our slab thickness is set properly. Now, with this, we'll also need to set a material for this, which is not set in here. We'll have to go back and set our material here. It says by category, so in this case it would be beams. We don't want that to be by category because we might have beams that are still. So we'll have to make a new parameter called Thickened Slab Material. Right. We load that back in. We can change this from the project. Thickened Slab Material. I'm going to take this concrete cast in place. We want it to match the floor. There we go. And now if we do a join, we have a nice thickened slab. Nice clean. So that is how I would deal with that. Keep in mind the different caveats of each of these methods, and I hope this has been helpful, and best of luck.